Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for your St. Patrick's Day. Save the news of the day video for a little later in the day because we're nearing the trade deadline, and I was like, all right, there could be a trade that takes place. I want to stick around, so now I'm doing the video. So while I'm making the video, now we'll end up getting a trade. But in today's news, Andre Sakura, who's coming back for Dallas, he's been put on waivers, so he may not be in their plans right now on the blue line, which tells me, I guess, Harley's played well enough, Hanley's played well enough as well that Sakura's on waivers. Yesterday's waivers cleared, so Benson's still a member of the Oilers, gets sent down to the AHL. As we're seeing a lot of movement up and down in the NHL. I'm not reporting on all of it either because then the board just gets filled. At this point in the year, we're seeing a lot of guys getting called up, a lot of guys get sent down as GMs try to figure out exactly what they have, what they need, and make the right move at the deadline. Which brings me to Florida. On the Florida front, Owen Tippett's being held out of the lineup. There is speculation that maybe this is a precursor to a trade for Tippett. Claude Giroux's name's going to get attached to Florida. It's going to get attached to Colorado. This is just how that works. And so Tippett being held out of the lineup is going to cause some eyebrow raising here and there. I don't think Tippett's had a fantastic year for Florida, but he's young. He is still a former first-round draft pick. There will be interest in Owen Tippett, I would think. So whether or not he's part of a deal for Giroux or not, I would think there's interest out there if he is on the block. I could see Vancouver being interested in Tippett if he's available. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens. Next on the board, Chabot. His season is done for the Ottawa Senators. So for Chabot, a broken hand for him. It does look like he's out for the rest of the year. Of course, Ottawa's not making the playoffs, so it's a matter of will he be better by April 29th? If the answer is no, then his season is done. It allows some of their younger defensemen to play a more prominent role. They play Chabot a ton. He's one of those guys that if he played somewhere else on a team with more success, I think he'd get more interest when it comes to Norris Trophy consideration. He doesn't score as many points, though, as some of the other players, but that may change as Ottawa gets better. His points total should as well. They'll miss him, but again, Ottawa's had a really tough time lately anyways. They've lost, 5 in a row in regulation, so yeah, it's been a tough time for them, and just losing Chabot's the latest in a long list for them this year. The NHL has stepped in and asked the PWHPA, the Women's Union, the PHF, the Women's League, to sit down and kind of hash things out, and they want them to come up with a vision for a single league. So the Women's Union wanted basically a sustainable league, a way that it's going to work. The PHF believes they have that model. PHF absolutely believes they have that model. And so if they sit down, we'll see what they come up with. But the NHL has made it pretty clear that in order for them to work in concert with a women's hockey league, they need one. They don't want to, take sides in this. There's NHL teams that have been supporting one or the other or both. But the league in general is perfectly willing to help, but it's going to have to be a single league. And again, for a women's league, it's about sustainability. That's what the union has said, is that it has to be a situation where it makes some sense. It's never been about, they want equal pay to what the men get. It's never been about free handouts or anything. It's been about creating a league that's going to be sustainable. And so, yeah, I do wish them the best with that. And the NHL obviously can help them out with advertising. And if you pair them up with NHL franchises, it works. And if you put the PHF and the PWHPA together, I would think you could have a league of at least 12 teams. Again, you want to pair them up with NHL teams as much as you can, have that cross promotion there, and I think it can work. I don't think they'll ever make the amount of money that the men's NHL does, but I think that you could come up with a scenario where you have a very vibrant women's league that does well on its own, and that's really kind of all they want, is to make sure that they've got a vision that works. It will be interesting to see how this goes, because if they weren't at loggerheads, if they weren't already button heads on some level, we wouldn't have this separate two entities that have a different way of going about it. So we've been talking about this for over 2 years. I'd like to see it come to an end. I'd like to see a single league. And again, it's a matter of having a setup that works. and I think they can come up with a setup that works. I think the PHF has made some strides over the last few years. I think the women's union's shown as well that they're able to, with their Dream Gap tour, kind of make that work. So we will see where this ends up, but the NHL's kind of kindly asked them to work together. And when the PHF commissioner announced she was stepping aside, there was some belief that maybe this was a sign that there was going to be a coming together between these two entities, and maybe she saw herself as being kind of in the way. And whether that's the truth or not, that was one of the things that were out there at the time. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. Again, it feels like this fall it may take place. Members of the women's union, Sarah Nurse, has come out and said that she's excited for what's coming down the pike. And, yeah, so it does sound like there may be some movement, some chance that we see a new women's league this fall. Or at the very least that the PHF would have some expansion, the union comes back in, and then the NHL might work on some logistic stuff with them, right? Okay, that being said, getting to injury news. Edler's returning tonight for the Kings. So yes, this is good news for the LA Kings that they're getting somebody back. I haven't seen anything on anybody else coming back, but Edler coming back is big. He's a veteran defenseman, good defenseman who was having actually a pretty decent year for the Kings. And so getting him back absolutely helps. That's a top 4. Gergenson's returning tonight for the Buffalo Sabres. So is Colin Miller. So they're getting a little bit healthier. Now, whether or not that means you move somebody else out at the deadline, Buffalo absolutely could be open for business. Although, as I reported in a recent video, there's some statements about whether or not they might be looking to add at the deadline, looking at next season and saying, we could add a couple of pieces here. But there's no rush. They may do that in the offseason. It might be a draft table kind of decision as well. Good news and bad news for Vegas fans. The good news is that Janmark and Howden are returning to the lineup, so that's going to help their depth. That may help their scoring as well, which has been woeful. On that road trip, the scoring was absolutely a huge part of the problem. They're playing Florida tonight, so they're going to need all the offense they can get. The bad news is it looks like Lehner could, I underlined could because it's not that he will, but he could miss the rest of the regular season. It looks like this injury could take him out. They're being very secretive about what's going on with Pacioretty, and Riley Smith, but it looks like none of them play tonight, and it's potentially an extensive time period for Lehner to be out, because if he misses the rest of the regular season, that's another 6 weeks from now. That's problematic, and I would think that has to force their hand at the deadline here, that they would have to go out and get a goaltender. Vegas needs to make the playoffs, and they need to make some noise in the playoffs. This is not a team that's built for the future. They're built for now, and if now isn't up to par, then they're going to have to revamp things as soon as maybe this off season, right? So for Vegas, the Lehner news is definitely frustrating because, and I mentioned this in the video I just did too, that Brossois' numbers have not been very good. Thompson's as well. Thompson's young. He's still potentially going to grow into being that starter, but they need one right now. And I'm not knowing of any bona fide starting goaltenders that might be on the market. So it might get more difficult for them. Although there's been rumors surrounding the Devils and whether or not Blackwood might be available, but Blackwood's been injured as well. And so, yeah, it's a lot. Now, Montreal is in a situation where Dvorak and Jake Allen have both been activated, so they demoted Primo back to the AHL. Although what's being reported is Montreal's not looking to move a goaltender. Carey Price's situation is cloudy enough that they want to just keep the goalies as they are. If they're going to make a change, odds are Montreal does that in the offseason. So yeah, Dvorak being activated should help their scoring depth. Allen being activated means they have a guy who can be a starter in the NHL. Montembeau's had some good games, but Jake Allen's a better goaltender than Montembeau. So yeah, we'll see how things go for Montreal. Minnesota is trying to move the rights to Jack McBain. Jack McBain, a 63rd draft pick in 2018. It's an Adam Fox kind of situation where they have his rights. They're trying to trade his rights. Apparently they were asking for a second rounder back in return. And now there's other teams looking at, there's a number of teams looking at him. So they might be able to get more than just a second rounder for him. But yeah, it will be interesting with McBain to see where he ends up, because there's enough interest that he may very well be ready to come up to the NHL as soon as a team gets his rights and signs him. But we're seeing a few situations where teams are signing undrafted free agents right now, or they're signing guys that teams drafted and weren't able to sign. So that's that for McBain. And then Twitter's been sent a Twitter regarding David Krejci, because his team's been eliminated from the playoffs. So does Boston sign Krejci? Right now, coincidentally, Boston's without Bergeron, and last night you could see the difference. I like Nosek. A lot of, he's got that compete level, but he's not a first-line center. Krejci is still, I think, capable of being a top-2 center. We can get into how damning it is for Boston if they were to desperately need to go out and get Krejci back at this point, especially, at this stage with Krejci being older. And we can discuss whether or not that means that Boston's definitely not a contender for the Stanley Cup. But, yeah, it does not surprise me to see him trending, because that was always the discussion point was, will the Bruins sign Krejci and try to get him back through? Now, with his season being over in Europe, I don't think that makes a difference. I think because he's played in Europe, if Boston signs him, I'm pretty sure he still has to go through waivers before he can join the Boston Bruins. And that's where the question would come up of, would every team that's competing with the Bruins right now let him pass? Would maybe a team near the bottom of the league let him pass through? Or is this the kind of thing where Ron Francis in Seattle might say, you know what, we'll claim Krejci. So if Krejci were to need waivers to come back over, I think that could potentially complicate things. But Boston, they really need that center depth fixed. It's been a problem for most of the year. I know they've won a lot of games. I know they're in a pretty good standing, but they need to fix that center spot, because I just don't see them being able to win a round in the East right now as their roster's made up. But we'll see. Stranger things have happened. Let me know your thoughts regarding any of these items on the board. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.